You ever take two existing things, mix them together, and claim it's now something new? Most of us probably have in our younger years when our imaginations were allowed to flourish and run wild. It's not completely out of line. The majority of films and shows we've come to know and love today are simply amalgamations of previous work that inspired them, or legitimately copy and pasted segments, chopped up and pieced together like a back alley surgery in a sketchy neighborhood you can't remember how you got to. The fourth episode of What If feels more or less like someone in the writing room said, "Hey, what if we just mix the first Iron Man with Black Panther?" It has heavy elements of both, and sure, it provides enough switch-ups throughout to some extent to create its own identity, but overall, that was one of the main takeaways I got from this. Does that mean it wasn't enjoyable or something? Let's get into it. The episode begins identically to the opening scene of the first Iron Man, where Tony is being escorted by the army in Afghanistan until his party gets ambushed by the Ten Rings. However, instead of a Stark Industries missile exploding and lodging a hunk of metal in Tony's chest in the horrific twist of fate we originally saw, he gets rescued by Killmonger, who just seemingly arrives out of nowhere. Interesting. Because of this save, Tony never endures the injury that puts him on the path to become Iron Man. We jump over to a Stark Industries press conference celebrating the return of Tony, and he openly promotes Killmonger to head of security for the company. But the happy vibes get a nasty wedge thrown in when a reporter suspects Killmonger of being aware of Tony's situation overseas. Hence the reason he just so happened to be there at the right time. And it turns out she's right. Killmonger openly admits to going undercover in the Ten Rings organization, which is how he knew about the assassination attempt, and goes on to reveal that Obadiah Stane was the one who funded their whole excursion. So, Obadiah gets knocked out, and then Tony offers Killmonger his job. Because, who else would be better tasked with overseeing the day-to-day administrative and operational functions of Stark Industries than a soldier with no knowledge of any sort of corporate procedures regarding the company? Nice move, Tony. But Pepper Potts doesn't seem to share Tony's enthusiasm about Killmonger, and is growing suspicious of his intentions. Cut to Tony's lab where he's having a conversation with his new COO about their history with their dads and how Killmonger never got a chance to finish making automated robotic soldiers. Wait, what? What an absolutely out-of-nowhere random-ass confession. Yeah, my dad died from gang violence and I never got to build these assassin robots that would replace human soldiers. What the fuck? And then with no hesitation at all, Tony's like, "Then let's build your science fair project together, best bud." Sorry, I think my eyes just rolled so far back into my head that I lost consciousness for a moment there. I bet this has no chance of ending poorly. After an unsuccessful first test, Killmonger suggests that they use vibranium as a power source. So, Tony decides to send James Rhodes to go get some from Ulysses Klaue. As Klaue unveils his stash, things get interrupted by Black Panther, until he gets interrupted by Killmonger, who takes Black Panther's glove and kills him and Rhodey. Acting like nothing happened, Killmonger heads back to Stark Industries, but Tony's already aware of his evil doings due to the security footage taken from Jarvis. Then Tony goes on to admit that he used a bit of vibranium to put that robot soldier into working order and sends it after his double-crossing pal. But with no trouble whatsoever, Killmonger gets the upper hand and defeats the robot, swiftly followed up by killing Tony. Upon investigation, it's discovered that Jarvis had been wiped clean and there was no security footage of what happened to Tony. Since it was a Wakandan spear that was used to kill him, they immediately assume Wakanda is attempting to go to war for taking their vibranium. So General Ross pops in and is like, "Alright, we own Stark Industries now. Let's mass produce some robot soldiers and put the completely non-suspicious Killmonger in charge." Back the fuck up for a second. Since when is Killmonger some insanely intelligent mastermind that rivals the wits of Tony Stark? I'm supposed to believe that he really had any idea of how to go about the process of wiping Jarvis's memory? How? How could he possibly know how to do that? I was really hoping I wouldn't have to say it for this show, but shut up. That involves story development. Fast forward to Killmonger taking a ride with Klaue to find Wakanda, which they do. Then Killmonger kills him. Gotta admit, the guy's fucking ruthless. So he takes Klaue's dead body into Wakanda as a peace offering, proclaims his lineage, and shows his tattoo on his lip to prove he's one of them. The discussion of the impending war comes up, and Killmonger uses his inside knowledge to break down the strategy of how to win against the robot soldiers. Open the Wakandan shields to let them in, and close the shields behind them. This way they get disconnected from Jarvis and shut down. Of course, his plan works, but then he uses his secret "fuck you" button to turn them back on so he can look like the hero in helping to take them down. So much of a hero that T'Chaka dons him the mantle of the new Black Panther. Cause that makes sense. hey shunned nephew that I haven't seen in decades that's most likely been here less than a week and abruptly arrived on absurdly suspicious terms, here's the greatest power and honor to be had in our country. Make your uncle proud. Back at Stark Industries, Shuri pays Pepper a surprise visit to show evidence that Killmonger killed Tony and T'Challa, and they say they should probably do something about that. And that's it. There's the breakdown of what if Killmonger saved Tony Stark? So, the final message that the Watcher delivers here is,
heroes are never really gone. They live forever, as do the ones they inspire to carry on the fight.
Which sounds uplifting. But, what the fuck about this episode was supposed to be uplifting? The whole thing is a long, drawn-out story about Killmonger double-crossing every person he meets to cheat his way to power. What, am I supposed to be uplifted because of Shuri's proof she discovers at the end? I mean, that's nice to have, but aren't you a bit late at this point? He's already the new Black Panther. And what even was Killmonger's endgame here? To take down the oppressors so he could be the oppressor? It's like T'Challa says to him in the Afterlife realm. He believes the cure to human suffering is more suffering, and ultimately, where is that going to lead? My guess is he's trying to eventually backstab his uncle and take over Wakanda. Great, then what? Rule the world and enslave humanity? I can't at any moment even slightly root for this guy. He's an utter piece of shit. I'm sorry, but it's somewhat difficult to feel bad about your situation when your response is fuck over every single person around you purely for self-gain. There is no noticeable indication that he's doing this for anyone other than himself, except for when he tries to shoehorn it into his ingenuine, pretentious speeches. But guess what, bud? Actions speak louder than words, and your actions prove you're a conceited douchebag in this predicament. If your only objective is to fight against your oppressors, then why do anything to put your native people and country that you've been longing to find in harm's way? Why not be an actual loyal servant to Wakanda and go on to somehow make a difference by showing that oppression isn't the way to go about gaining what you want? It's working together, putting differences aside, and letting everyone use their strengths to create a better environment in society for those in it now and those to come later. Instead, he's on a track to leave a legacy worse than the people he rose up against to take revenge on. I digress. Aside from him, it was of course a pleasure to hear Chadwick Boseman once again. I feel like he's given one of the most believable performances in all his appearances throughout the episodes, and it just shows how interested he was in him being a part of the show, and I love that. Seeing an episode that gives Tony Stark a little time to actually breathe, as well as be focused on a bit, was nice, and Mick Winger delivers a very serviceable Robert Downey Jr.-like performance. But other than that, I'm unfortunately saddened to say that I'm just a slight bit underwhelmed here. I didn't necessarily dislike the episode, but it just didn't grab me and transport me somewhere else the same way the previous 4 episodes have. I still enjoyed this more than the first episode. It still felt more like an original story, but only to a certain degree. Other than the involvement of Tony Stark, this story feels awfully reminiscent to Killmonger's original motives in the Black Panther movie, which, in that case, perhaps his endgame is to hand over vibranium Christmas presents to the oppressed children across the world and let violence reign supreme. Who knows if we'll ever know. The episode ends before it gets a chance to answer much of anything. Anyway, I'm more than willing to accept this one for what it is and keep on looking forward to the rest. I found out that all of these episodes are indeed leading up to an event that culminates in some sort of crossover, as the finale is supposed to deal with the Guardians of the Multiverse fighting against an all-powerful version of Vision known as Infinite Ultron. If the plan is to have a character from each episode, I think it'd be cool if they had Killmonger meet the version of T'Challa that became Star-Lord. I mean, that T'Challa was able to talk Thanos out of annihilating half of the universe. Imagine the positive result that would come from him having a chat with his multiversal cousin. Well, as always, everyone, I would love to know what you thought about this episode. Did you enjoy this one more than I did? Or did you also find it to be just a little lackluster in comparison to what the show has been giving us lately? What do you think Killmonger's endgame was? And do you think Shuri and Pepper had any chance of stopping him with the news they found? But the question I'm most curious about, what do you think of the idea of Killmonger meeting Star-Lord T'Challa in the crossover finale? Let me know those opinions in the comments, like the video if you enjoyed this content, subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you can keep up with future breakdowns, and I'll catch you at the next review.